Who's this? Want to take another look? Can you see the spear shaking? Ah, I'm sure you have guessed it now. It is none other than Shakespeare. His full name is William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare lived in England in the years between the years 1564 to 1616, which is the Elizabethan and the Jacobin era. He was an English poet and dramatist and is considered by many to be the greatest dramatist of all time, or what we call today as the GOAT. He was a great storyteller and an astonishingly clever with words and images. He understood human nature very well, with its weaknesses like ambition, love for power, betrayal, and human strengths like valor, love, honor, loyalty, and so on. Shakespeare portrayed the complete range of human emotions and conflicts in his plays and works. Shakespeare has left behind a huge volume of works which can be classified as follows. He has written a total of 37 plays, of which comedies are 17, and histories or biographies, as we call, of the kings of England at that time were 10 plays, and the most important of all, the tragedies, which constitute 10 plays of his works. And that's not all. He has also written up 154 sonnets. And if you will ask what is a sonnet, it is a poem of 14 lines with 3 quatrains, 12 lines, and a final couplet, which is 2 lines. And Shakespeare is famous for both his plays and his sonnets. The 5 most popular plays of Shakespeare are The Merchant of Venice, and we have all heard of Shylock, the Jew, and Romeo and Juliet, who hasn't heard of them? And of course, Macbeth. Then the last play, The Tempest, and what concerns us here today, Julius Caesar. Hi, my name is Smarajit Basu, and I'm an educator with a few years of experience in educating young Indians. Since this is the first video of my channel, Step Up with Smarajit, I wish to give a brief introduction about myself. I'm an English literature graduate and also a CELTA trained educator. I'm also a management graduate and a law graduate too, and I've spent years in the corporate sector in advertising and working with multinationals, including BPOs. I've also taught in management technical institutes and including management subjects, and I'm also UGC net qualified in that area. And with my channel, I wish to help Indians who want to get ahead in life and to prosper. So that's about myself. Let's go back to our video. Julius Caesar historically was the Roman emperor in the year 44 before Christ, or BC. And Shakespeare has taken the same Julius Caesar, the historical character, and written a play about him, which we shall study here. And you would like to know who are the main characters in this famous play. The first and foremost is, of course, Julius Caesar himself, who is the emperor of Rome. And then we have Marcus Antonius, or Mark Antony, who was a Caesar loyalist. And then we have the conspirators, Marcus Brutus being the chief among them, and he was a friend of Julius Caesar himself. Then we have Caius Cassius, who's the main conspirator actually. And then we have the other conspirators like Casca, Trebonius, Ligarius, Decius Brutus, Metellus Cimber, Cinna, and so on, who are all senators of Rome. This brings us to the themes, on which themes Shakespeare has written his play of Julius Caesar. The first, we have the theme of power and ambition. Power and ambition of Julius Caesar himself, but nonetheless, the ambition of the conspirators as well. And the second theme on which it is based is political conspiracy, where the conspirators conspire against Julius Caesar. And of course, the third theme it is based on is of betrayal, where we have Brutus, Julius Caesar's close friend, actually betraying him in the end. And it's based on also the themes of honor and loyalty, which we shall see in the character of Mark Antony mostly. And of course, his speech and the power of rhetoric, which Shakespeare has displayed in this play, where we can turn the crowd with his famous speeches, which is emotional and famous speeches. And of course, Shakespeare also depends on free will versus fate as a theme in this play, where we see that Caesar, though he is very ambitious and very self-willed, ultimately falls prey to the fate, where he is fated to be killed on a particular day. And once the larger theme of this play is, if we are looking versus republicanism versus Caesarism. Republicanism, we can say, is democracy, and Caesarism is dictatorship. So these are the themes on which the play of Julius Caesar is based. Beware the Ides of March. That's what you see here. It is the line which is told by the soothsayer warning Julius Caesar of his assassination. Now we will come to a brief act-wise summary of the play, where we have in Acts 1 and 2 the rise of the conspiracy. The play opens with Caesar returning in triumph in Rome, and his return is being celebrated by the commoners. Then there's the Feast of Lupercal, and there we see the soothsayer warning Caesar about the Ides of March. Then we have Cassius, who manipulates Brutus to come and join the conspirators. And once the conspiracy is formed, they get to a plan how to get rid of Caesar, because he's growing too popular and his wings need to be clipped, and finally, so that the people of Rome can enjoy democracy, as Caesar, with his powers, was tending to become a dictator. But in the meanwhile, we have Calpurnia, who's dreamt that Caesar's statue is bleeding, and that is considered a bad omen. And she pleads with Caesar not to go to the Senate, where she fears that he will be harmed. Then we have Decius Brutus coming in at that moment. He's one of the conspirators, and he very cleverly reinterprets that dream and says that people, because Caesar is so famous and is so valuable to the people of Rome, they will take his blood as a relic. And Caesar decides to go to the Senate. It is because of Decius Brutus has pricked his pride, and he says that he is not a coward, but he will bravely go to the Senate, come what may. And that's what leads to its downfall. The key idea in these two acts, the conflicts which builds between fate, ambition, and a sense of loyalty to Rome. Have you ever heard of the line, et tu, Brute, which means, you too, Brutus? This was famously said by Caesar after his assassination, when he was stabbed by Brutus. Now, we come to the Act 3 of the play, which is the climax, where Caesar arrives at the Senate, and there is a person called Artemidorus who warns of the conspirators and the conspiracy, and he wants to give a letter to Caesar, but that letter does not reach him. And we have a conspirator called Metellus Cimber, who pleads with Caesar to revoke the banishment of his brother, and all the conspirators then converge on Caesar and then assassinate him at the base of Pompey's statue within the Senate of Rome. After the killing, Brutus speaks to the crowd. He knows that they have committed an act which will shock everyone. Therefore, he tries to justify his killing of and by the conspirators why they were paying to kill Caesar. And more so by Brutus because he was Caesar's friend. And his act of betrayal will not be looked upon kindly by all. Therefore, he says, not that I loved Caesar less, but I love Rome more. And that was his justification for the assassination of Julius Caesar. Now we have the great loyalist Mark Antony come in, and he gives a funeral speech, the most famous speech that we know of, which turns the crowd against the conspirators. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The good that men do gets oft interred with their bones, while the evil lives after them. So let it be with Caesar. So this famous speech of Antony is so emotional because of the ghastly deed of the murder of Julius Caesar. And before that, where Brutus has tried to justify the killing. So therefore, Antony targets Brutus very cleverly in this speech and turns the crowd against the conspirators. So we see in this Act 3, the turning point where the power shifts due to the rhetoric of Mark Antony. And the speech, friends, Romans, and countrymen, is there for all time. It's famous for all time. And like all conflicts, it has to be decided by a battle. So in this play as well, we have the Battle of Philippi. And the fallout and the tragedy, the denouement of the play, we see in the Acts 4 and 5. Where after the assassination of Caesar, where the conspirators have fled Rome, we have Mark Antony, we have Octavius Caesar, who was the nephew of Julius Caesar, and Lepidus. They form a triumvirate and run the affairs of Rome. And in the meantime, we see Brutus and Cassius also prepare for war, because Antony and the triumvirate are there to avenge the assassination of Caesar. And while Brutus and Cassius prepare for war, in the plains of Sardis, the ghost of Caesar appears and is visible only to Brutus, because we see the Shakespearean device of ghosts appearing here in this play as well, which is nothing but the guilt of Brutus's mind, which appears as Caesar's ghost and mocks him. Then we have the battle at Philippi, where Cassius dies because he is mistaken that his friend has died, therefore they have lost the battle, and he decides to kill himself. And Brutus having seen that Cassius has killed himself, and they also having lost the battle, he runs on his own sword. Brutus is defeated and he commits suicide. But since Brutus is a noble Roman who is highly regarded by Romans because his forefathers had done something, they had banished the king Tarquin from Rome. Therefore, they all believed in the patriotism of Brutus, and that he was enticed by the wily Cassius to get into the conspiracy and commit the heinous crime of assassinating Julius Caesar. That is the tragic end and the consequences of betrayal and moral conflict that we see in the last scenes. And he ends the play with saying that Mark Antony says, "This was the noblest Roman of them all. Marcus Brutus was the noblest Roman of them all." And thus we come to the end of the play. See you in our next video, where we shall describe in detail about the play with line-by-line explanations. Thank you for watching, and if you have liked the video, please like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Thank you.